Hey everybody, it's Book of Katherine. I hope you're doing well. So today I have a bit of a different topic, I guess. Well, not really a different topic. I'm just going to talk about an actual person. There's actually somebody, an actual figure that I want to talk about. I saw them on a YouTube video and I was so shocked and startled. I have this huge list of things, of videos, like this huge list of things that I needed to go over with you guys, and it like wiped everything off the slate this morning. Like everything just like right off the slate. I was so shocked about it. I was so shocked. You probably already know since, it's in the title. John Macarthur is supposed to be super, super big pastor, Christian pastor, super mega church. So it's supposed to be, what he says on his website is, and then, I became pastor of this thing, and then amazing things happened. And I was just like, what? Did you do miracles? Like in the book of Acts? I didn't hear about that. That's supposed to be the sign. Any prophets doing miracles? I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting. But no, this is what I get. Boom, he says, this is why Ben Shapiro sponsors have them on. Because, Ben Shapiro and all these people, their sponsors, they're the same as the leftists. They're the same climate change people. Because today is a big day. Today is a big election day. Today is March 4th. March 3rd elections happened. You guys changed the Democratic Party. You freaking changed the Democratic Party in the primaries. You went ahead and cleaned out a lot of the GOP in the primaries. And they didn't say anything. The entire right-wing media just went, Israel. We're going to go talk about Israel all of a sudden. All of a sudden talking about Israel, about an election we all knew how it was going to turn out. No one had any doubt. As if Netanyahu's back to the mafia. He'd blow up anybody. He'd blow up anybody who would get in his way. Are you kidding me? Netanyahu created this guy in order to make himself more popular. Come on. Because if Netanyahu did not create an opponent, then they would have kicked him out. You do understand that. They would start thinking of him as a dictator. Don't you know anything about politics? Doesn't anyone know anything about emperors or empires? Does not anybody watch the smirk on his face and the way he moves around in politics? I can't believe it. I watched Chuck Missler go, I really like that Netanyahu guy. And I wanted to throw up. I was like, does no one watch him? Watch him. There's a difference between what they say and what they do. The UN. Okay, So here's what Macarthur said. When Ben Shapiro had him on the show, Ben Shapiro's like, well, when you vote, what is it you vote for? First of all, three things happened. First thing out the gate is he says, I don't really pay attention to politics. I care about eternal things. And then all of a sudden he says, a little bit down the other side, he goes, well, now, unfortunately, we're getting into things like culture. And I'm like, you know why that happened? Because you didn't care about who your leaders were. You cared about eternal things. When you care about eternal things up here, you look up here and you don't give a rat's mother whatever about who the heck is leading you, making your laws, making your government, then evil will take it. Evil will say, thank you. Satan will just go ahead and go, take it, I'll just eat it all up. What the heck are you doing? I'm sorry, sheep's comes, wolf clothing, boom, boom, boom. I'm going to go pay attention on eternal. I'm going to go look at the goggles, and I'm going to go look here. Do you know who else says that? The Buddhist said that. I'll never forget the day I went on a flight with a Buddhist. Literally, I have a lot of friends who are Buddhists. There is a Buddhist. Can we all agree that there are like Buddhists that we know who are like cool? And then there are Buddhists that we know that are like, they have fully detached. They have reached that moment where they have just fully detached and you're like, I don't know them anymore. I've lost them. Does that make sense? I mean, I think that happens in all faiths. Like there's ones that are great. You can still relate to them. They still think of you as an equal and a human being. And then there are those who just go, whoop, like I've become this and you are no longer this. This guy was that kind of Buddhist. Like he just sat like this on the plane and he was just like, but he let you know. That was the weird thing, is that most of my friends who are Buddhists, that wasn't the first thing they said to me. Like it came along. Or if people tell me at their doctor's office or whatever, it sort of comes along. it was like he wanted me to know that while I ignore you and make sure that you are dirt on my feet, and while I make sure that I'm going to sit here and I don't want you to touch anything around me, and while I sit here and elevate myself above you, I want you to know it's because of Buddhism. I want you to know that this is the reason why I'm detaching. I want you to know that I have found Zen, but I'm just sitting there going, but what you've decided to do is completely remove yourself from society, and you're asking all of us to change our lives in order for you to do that. You're asking all of us to change the way we live around you in order to facilitate you being detached. You're basically climbing up into the mother's womb and being like, and wanting all of us to mother you. And I'm like, that's not Zen. Nope, sorry, nope, no. You haven't found peace with the world. You have found a way to make war with the world. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's the same thing as going, I've just focused on the eternal. I'm focused on more eternal things. Doesn't that just sound so martyrish? Don't you just hate people like that? And then what they do is they let your town burn. While they say they care about all these ethics and morals, they let you burn. They let you burn. I'll never forget it. Oh my gosh. Anyway, so they'll tell you, that's what's really funny, is that every conservative on there, every Christian evangelical conservative on there that I've seen on YouTube, they've all said that politics matters. They've all said that politics matters, and who rules it. They all want a God-fearing person to rule. Macarthur said it. He said, I want a God-fearing person to rule. But then what he says is we don't concern ourselves with that. We're eternal. And I'm like, then who's going to run? What God-fearing person's going to run? You're telling your entire flock that we shouldn't concern ourselves. He actually said the business of government was concerning yourself with the things of mortal men. I was like, are you kidding? And this is why I need to breathe. I need to breathe. This is why, because I've been reading through the Old Testament now, and all the prophets do is concern themselves with the things of mortal men. Never once do these prophets, speaking for the Lord, say, thou should look eternal. Detach yourself from the world and look eternal. No, they say, you, ruler, get your butt in line. Why aren't you ruling better? Here's what's coming. Get ready. Get thee prepared. Then the next thing he says, another thing he says, we submit to the powers that be. I would argue that the American Revolutionary wasn't Christian act at all. And I was like, I just about was like, they prayed on their knees 24/7, those men for the American Revolution. They were on their hands and knees praying, writing that Declaration of Independence. Those men were in that house. They were praying in that Senate chamber. They had church services until 1848. They were praying in there, holding church services in there. They were saying before God. Benjamin Franklin was like, the only way we can do this, it is by he said, it is clear to me that God is always involved in the affairs of man and the government of man. And if we don't turn to God and see what God wants us to do, then this is going to be a futile effort. And they actually say in their Declaration of Independence and in their Constitution, all they say is this. They say, you say that you are the only one. King says that you say you're the only one that can talk to God. And that's not what the Bible says. You are denying the Messiah. The Messiah came so that we can all talk to God, so therefore we can self-govern. And we talk to God too. And God, I'm just sitting there going, we have an entire Washington, D.C. that says, literally in the shape of a cross, that literally says we bow to no king, because all the kings throughout Europe have sepulchers and big, huge things that say we stand in the place of Christ, which is literally what I found out their texts say Antichrist is. But this guy, John Arthur, is way too busy looking out over eternal things. We care about eternal things. We don't care about temporal things. And then, oh my gosh, they're talking about families. I'm sorry, they're talking about families? Oh, are we talking about abortion now? Well, where were you 150 years ago when they first started talking socialism? when you stopped meeting for church in 1848. Maybe that's when you decided to start looking temporal and you stopped talking to God, as you say. Have you even been to Washington, D.C. and seen how often God is actually etched into these men's? Abraham Lincoln, how often they talk about God. That's what I keep learning when I go to D.C. All these men talk about is God, 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 God. And I am learning when I read this Old Testament, all God is interested in is the affairs of men. And I'm sorry, but the American Revolution, Christians are called to be a docile people? Is that a joke? What is the Hebrew Bible except Israel freaking battling everyone all the time and being an independent nation? How often? Battle of Jericho. Walls came tumbling down. It's like I feel like there's this split. I'm like, yes, Jesus came and he dealt with the Romans really, really well. Let's talk about why Jesus dealt with the Romans really, really well. Maybe that's because when it came to him dying, he was supposed to have absolutely no sins on him. Do you remember that? He had to be to fulfill this prophecy. He had to be completely blameless. If he became a warlord, he would not be completely blameless. He had to have 0 on him. That doesn't mean that God had a complete personality change. You guys act as if Jesus is the one and only personality of God. No, it said, this will be my arm. Did you even read Isaiah? I'm sorry, I'm too exhausted. I just feel like John Macarthur, I understand why they had him on now. Number 2, I want to vote for the structures that produce the most ordered society. And I was like, then frickin' move to China, John Macarthur. They have the most ordered society on earth, and they've got plenty of Christians ordered up, chopped liver. Why don't you go with them? The CCP is the most ordered society I know. Not one word about freedom did I hear. Not one word about created equal. Not one. Didn't back up the forefathers at all. These people who prayed on their knees day and night and who actually searched and searched and searched to find out what they were being told through what they called the Holy Spirit. I don't really hear. I see through the New Testament how often these people are like, we went where the Spirit led us. Do you know what I don't hear from Christians today in all these podcasts? And what I don't, John MacArthur made a ton of claims about what all Christians are. Christians don't do this. Christians don't do that. Christians don't do this. And I was like, wow, you know what you just said? You just said, I read a story. I wrote my novel based on the story of a prophet. I couldn't believe this story I ran across in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, I ran across this story where a prophet is called on by God to be hit in the head with a rock in order to fool a king. That's right, lie to a king on the side of the road, pretend like they were a bleeding servant of theirs so that the king would stop and talk to him so that the prophet would deliver a prophecy to a king, because God of the Bible is constantly involving himself in the politics of lowly mortal men. And so, boom, there he is. And he turns to his assistant and he says, take that rock and smack me in the head. And do you know what that's? Does exactly what every good Catholic boy and what apparently John MacArthur of Grace Community Church would do, and said, no, that's violent. I'm not smacking you in the head with a rock. And the guy said, then a lion come and eat you. And there appeared a lion, and it ate the guy. And I never understood that. I understand it now. I kept digging. I understand it now because prophets are the voice of God. They literally are a replacement for the voice of God. And when they say, hit me with a rock, it means hit me with a rock. You guys clearly don't study your own Bibles. I just saw a Jewish person finally say, I can't believe anyone thinks the way you dress or the way you act will define who God is, will define a relationship with God. Facing this way will suddenly define your relationship with God or who God is. And I'm just like, I can't believe these people supposedly have a spirit and they can actually talk to God and start going one-on-one. It's like they get the Garden of Eden again, and no one's going out there and getting to know, like having one-on-one. And there should be no rules for anyone, because it's gone back to the Garden of Eden. They have one rule now, and that's obey God. All these other books of the Bible that come after, it's written to specific churches with specific problems. I think it's hysterical when I see a church out there, when I'm watching there, and they're like studying this thing. They're studying the book of Ephesians. And then it says, I'm reading it to my husband. I'm like, these guys, it says you're murdering, you're eating people, you're doing this. And I was like, why is this church in Southern California studying a book that's written to people who are murdering and eating people? Is that church down there having a problem murdering and eating people? Like, seriously. And I haven't heard a single pastor talk about what that means about, like, well, what did God say to you? No one talks about that. And what miracle have you done? What's the miracle of this? Anyway, so the prophet, the lion actually eats the kid for disobeying God. I understand that now. And that's what I wrote in the book and everything like that. I understand that now. The kid was supposed to obey God and hit the guy in the rock. That's right. In the head, do violence. And so the next assistant comes along and he says, hit me with the rock. Wham, smacks him, cracks his head open or whatever. Or I think the prophet has to do it to himself. Cracks his own head open. That's right. God asked a prophet to crack his own head open with a rock. But guess what it does? It gets him with the king. He goes to the king and he says, hey, you king. And the king stops by the side. He sits there with a rag and he's bleeding at the side of the road. And the king pulls up and it's like, are you okay? And literally the prophet's like, it's me. And the king's like, it's you. Because apparently prophets are not something that kings like to run into, apparently. And so the king's like, oh God, it's you. And the prophet's like, their servant did this, and your servant did this, and your servant did this. What say you? Which is it going to be? Are you going to do this thing? Or are you going to do this thing? And the king's like, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to do this thing. And the prophet goes, because you've done this instead of that, and your job as a king is to rule this way. And I'm like, dang, I don't think the king is even under Judaism. And I was like, and I realized that literally this king got his butt kicked by a prophet because he didn't rule wisely. He didn't do a good job ruling. I have really learned how much God cares about government, which clearly the American revolutionaries learned, and which clearly the Christian church of today, whatever that is. Remember how I said I really feel like the Christian church has turned into Luciferians? Man, I don't think this is Luciferianism, but I can sure say when you say that they think that they maybe should have obeyed their elders and gone with the king, gone with the monarch who was literally saying that his voice was in place of Jesus's. He was the supreme leader of the Church of England. Literally saying we should have obeyed the definition of the Antichrist and that they couldn't have any fair representation. I think that's a very interesting leader to have at Grace Community Church. 2 thumbs up. Great way to go. So when people say, oh, I saw Chuck Missler say this thing. He was like, oh, people ask, why hasn't God judged America? Why hasn't God judged America? I don't see any happy Christians around. Ha, 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 ha. I don't see any happy churches around. I see them pretty pissed. So the happy people around I see are Democrats who just cleaned out their house. They care about government. They found out what their Democrats were doing. They saw their Democrats sitting down at every single speech, and they were like, I have a problem with that. Because they actually care about who leads them. And they found out their Democratic leaders were lying to them. And they're starting to replace them. Maybe if you cared about who leads you, you'll replace them. I'm so happy I'm an independent. This is such a fun election year. Biggest elections of all. And it is so fun to watch both sides because, boy, does it look like the Democrats are the ones who are actually following up with justice for all. Congratulations, Democrats. You are actually going towards created equal. And I am so impressed with you. You are going towards created equal and freedom for all. And I hate to tell you, some of you Democrats might not like this or anything like that. I hate to tell you, but that is one thing that when he went after, there's one thing that was in these forefathers, that's what the things they fought for was freedom. I hate to tell you, but that's the only religion. Atheism's killed more people. Remember, Remember, every government that's been like state-driven atheism has locked up the gays first. Just remember that. Just remember that. Just remember that. That's why I'm digging into Christianity. I'm like, you don't have to be a Christian, but boy, you have got to support the government that they created. You've got to support the government they created. You've got to support the government they created because we're the only ones with freedoms. And the only way we got those freedoms, you've got to start reading how they got those freedoms. They did that through I'm learning a lot of reading and a lot of praying. And they say it. They say that we trust in the one true sovereign God. He will back us in this war. They say that, you guys, to the king of it. They're the only ones who have ever made war on a monarch. You know that? I mean, except for maybe Poland and stuff like that. But these guys won. That's a big deal. Like, they went to war against Prussia, Germany. They went to war against the Pope. And they went to war against England. It's not a small fight that they lost. I mean, we're watching Australia suffer now. The UK suffer now. And we're watching Canada suffer. I mean, the slavery rates in these places, the alcoholism rates in these places. And I know that we're getting attacked hard, but that's because we're free. They hate our freedoms. And so they come after our media. I mean, it was funny, Chuck Missler, like, I saw he, like, goes down. He was spending the end of his days in New Zealand because it's so peaceful down there. And I was like, don't you understand why I went to New Zealand. I went to New Zealand for weeks. Of course it's peaceful down there. I didn't understand why. I thought, oh, it's on the edge of the world. I understand why now. I understand why now. New Zealand has 2 races. 2 races. That's it. You know why? It's owned by a monarchy. And they don't blend. That monarchy has 54 nations underneath it. And a monarchy doesn't want to they don't allow any division. I realize now looking back, like that culture, it wasn't allowed to grow. They had their universities. It was meant to serve the monarchy, the whole land. The people weren't wealthy there. They had that land under lock and key. So Americans can go there. Chinese people can go there who earned their wealth elsewhere. But you can't go to New Zealand and make it big. You know, Peter Jackson had to come here and make it big, then go there and film Lord of the Rings. You don't make it big at a monarchy, honey. Not Nicole Kidman, not Mia Khalifa, none of them. They all had to come here, honey. Love you guys. No, I didn't drink an energy drink. I'm just really ticked that people are just shredding the Constitution. I'm sitting here trying to find out what created the Constitution, and as I'm digging into it and learning about it, I'm finding out, I see what they're doing. It's a great technique. They're like, who are the Trump base? Who's the Trump vaders? Oh, let's go find their people, and let's go tell them they're doing the wrong thing. Let's go tell them they're doing the wrong thing by replacing, they shouldn't be fighting the status quo. And let me tell you, they did a good job by picking John Macarthur. He's the perfect communist regime pick. Perfect. He'll vote for everyone the police says to go for. He'll vote for, just every union official. He'll go for every single one. And he won't, if the news says they're corrupt, then he'll agree that they're corrupt. He'll never, ever look underneath that hood. No. Too busy looking at the eternal. Too busy being detached. I thought the whole point of churches is supposed to be focused on your community and like serving the community. At least that's what I learned from, Robin Hood, Maid Marian. Where is that? Peace out. Donate down below, just $1 a month. That's all I need. So if you haven't done your $1 a month, just PayPal. It has 0, and it says you can set any amount you want. So if you want to do 25 cents, that's totally cool. It helps more than you think. If you want to do more, that's great. But you can just enter $1 and then you're all set for the month. Or you can do $12 and never have to worry about it again. You can hear me say this and be like, honey, she all good. She all good. She all good. I forgot one last thing. I got something for you. Ba-dam! Oh, look what I got in the mail yesterday. On March 3rd, I got it in the mail. Isn't that a good treat? Isn't that a good treat? Thank you so much for getting it for me. We're going to have so much fun together. Love you guys. Bye. Have fun using yours to tell everybody what's been done. Mine is Right to Try. I got Right to Try so that I get to be up here and talking to you guys. Yeah. Bye, you guys. Love you. Mwah.